Welcome back into another edition of Kolby's Corner Live, coming to you here from Blacksburg, Virginia, March 24th, year of our Lord 2026, coming from Virginia Tech spring practice number 4. Adversity. I think adversity, I try and pick a word for every show. I think adversity is the one today. We won't lead with that, but we'll get into it. Excited to jump on here and get back to Kolby's Corner's roots, just talking ball straight after it. If you have any comments, drop those in the live chat. And yeah, we'll get into it. But good day of practice. If you're just joining here, we're going to get into spring practice intel, a little bit of recruiting. But before you do that, head over to vtscoop.com. Helps me out a ton. Go check out the annual VIP membership with code Kolby. You get the full year over there over on vtscoop.com. Transfer portal, wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting, and a whole lot more community. So make sure to go check that out. This is a great environment, but we can only get into so much here. So don't want to take too long tonight. Just get into the nitty-gritty of what went down at practice. So starting off, I guess the biggest news of the day for Virginia Tech spring practice today, A.J. Brand, the former quarterback, switching full-time to wide receiver. We talked about this on this program for many months now, through winter and even going back into last fall, about a potential position change for the former South Carolina Gatorade Player of the Year. And I don't think you can underemphasize, how great of an athlete A.J. Brand is. Like, South Carolina Gatorade Player of the Year, had over 2,000 yards on the ground for Irmo, leading them all the way to, I believe, the state semifinal. I mean, that team was stocked full of talent, but he was the engine that made that operation go. And, the writing was sort of on the wall. Virginia Tech brings in Ethan Grunkmeyer, Bryce Baker. Keldon Ryan was still probably ahead of him. You have the true freshman, Troy Hune, and it just didn't look that way. Now, stemming back to even A.J. Brand's recruitment, it was down between Virginia Tech and South Carolina, and the reason Virginia Tech kind of came out there on top was because they afforded him the opportunity to play the quarterback position. South Carolina was recruiting him primarily as a defensive back, and then up until the last couple of weeks, they said, okay, we'll take you as a quarterback. So that's kind of how that went down there. But, I think it's a really big pull, and sort of interesting to see him go to the wide receiver room as opposed to, we talked about on here, running back or potentially the safety, as was touched on. Wide receiver, James Franklin talked about it after him going there, just staying in the offensive room, more offensive-minded, a little bit more similar. Saw a couple of routes from him. We had one curl route come back to the quarterback. It looked fresh, for someone that hasn't repped there in years and years. Looked pretty fluid compared to a couple other guys. And Franklin was there, singing his praises. There you go, 18. So I thought that was good to see. Element that Franklin brought up with special teams. He's just too good of an athlete for someone to walk from the program. You just have to find where he fits on the football field positionally. But nonetheless, very interesting news. First big position change of spring. A.J. Brand going to wide receiver in a room that's not crowded but competitive. James Franklin made sure to make that, reservation as well. We'll get into the wide receiver a little bit later, but I think that is the biggest news. A.J. Brand going to receiver. We'll see how he fits in there. I think he'll instantly factor in on special teams and potentially the wild hokey package, a little bit of wildcat, as James Franklin said. After all, Ty Howell and that staff has a pretty good track record of transforming former high school quarterbacks into tight ends or other skill position guys. I'm not sure it'll hit the field this year, but definitely in the futures. But, I think that parlays really nicely into the overall quarterback battle discussion, where you look at, I think Ethan Grunkmeyer holds the reins pretty firmly on that battle. You would expect him to, coming in, being that guy from Penn State that Ty Howell, James Franklin have familiarity with. And he's honestly lived up to the bill so far in what we've seen in open practice periods. I think another really solid day from him, getting out of the pocket, layering throws to all sides of the field, getting different receivers involved. Some of these guys are just getting back healthy that he hasn't thrown to. And, you can see them trying to get on the same page, but he really hasn't missed a beat. Right behind him, Bryce Baker, he brings a different element. You saw in the angle fit drill, or the alley drill, here, that you could see some of that. There's Grunk rolling, but you see Bryce Baker and the element that he brings. And I keep going back to what Penn State did. There he is, with Bo Fabula and Drew Aller, just having him in there as a secondary option. I think you're going to see a lot of those snaps. I know people keep going and saying this isn't as much of a quarterback competition as James Franklin and a lot of the staff is pitching, but he's also gone back to the fact of, hey, we need two guys that we can win with right now, and they're really trying to incite that competition. I would still say that the overall vibe of the competition is going Grunkmeyer, Baker, then Hune, and Ryan right behind there in the mix. But yeah, even Troy Hune, the true freshman, he has every bit of 6'4.5", 6'5". He's going to have to fill out his frame quite a bit, but he's looked really good early for someone who's just stepped on a college campus 10 weeks ago or so. I think he's had some really impressive poise in the live bullets we've seen him able to take in practice. But yeah, that quarterback battle, you can just tell Grunkmeyer not only just leading the team, as that guy, just vocally, it's very clear. And then he's backed it up, just putting balls in the catch spot, giving guys opportunities to go up and make plays, something that you just haven't seen in practices, let alone at this 2 deep, 3 deep, 4 deep, even Keldon Ryan making some really nice throws. So I think that'll be interesting to see. And then we talked to Franklin about the wide receiver room, which we talked about with AJ Brand going over there. And, I'd even put out a tweet the day before about Amari Polidor and how he had some similarities to Mansour Lane and used the verbiage crowded. Franklin kind of pushed back on that post-practice and was like, I don't know if it's crowded. I would say there's a lot of opportunity. He's consistently highlighted Aiden Green as one of those guys in that room that he's really only kind of named. Specifically, Krishan Brown was another guy today that he sort of touched on, but he's been very vague on some of those other guys in the wide receiver room. So in one drill today, the order went Aiden Green, Takai Heath, Kishan Brown, the Penn State transfer Tyseer Denmark, Chance Wiggins, Snook Peterkin, who's coming back off of injury, Luke Stewie, Keelan Adams, who's still working back. We'll see if both those guys roll in the scrimmage this Saturday, Jeff Exenor, and then Cam Sparks. So, he's listed off a lot of guys right there, a lot of former blue chips, but not many of them past those top three. I've seen many collegiate snaps. So while there's still a lot of projection in there, there's not a lot of production. We've been pitching this, but who's going to step up? Today, nothing really jumped off the page. Didn't see any live periods, but one thing I think to note in that room is how the tight end is going to be utilized. Like Luke Reynolds, yeah, he's listed as a tight end. I think he's going to be split out wide quite a bit in this offense. He brings a very, very potent skill set. He can do a ton of different things and has a great rapport with 17, Ethan Grunkmeyer. Troy Hune's put a lot of really nice balls his way. I think he's going to factor very heavily into the pass catcher situation, as well with Benji Gosnell. To be expected with the tight ends, but someone in that wide receiver room is going to step up. How's the slot going to look? Does Takai Heath, Kishan Brown, Keelan Adams, Tyseer Denmark, who fits in there? It'll be interesting to see, I guess, who catches punts. I think that would probably go to Kishan Brown or Tyseer Denmark, one of the two, because, Marlon Jackson's down in that wide receiver room. So AJ Brand, being that 6'2", 200-pound guy, could he go slide his way out there with Chance Wiggins to be more of an outside threat? A lot's going to have to play itself out. But there. Some other notes from the day. In that same angle drill, you could just tell Brent Pry fiending to go out and coach linebackers on angles and run lanes. So that was really interesting. There was one play where Takai Heath, being 160-pound whatever wide receiver on the very much lighter side, going out there and holding his block pretty much the whole way against true freshman mid-year enrollee Matthew Lamar. But Pry got on him and pulled him over, and very coachable point to him right after that. So you could see how intentional everyone is. And I think that's different than what you've seen in the past. And it's easy to say that and the team looks bigger, they look faster, they look different getting off the bus. But really just when they segment out, you can just tell how much more. And Matt Moore, Fontel Mines, you kind of know what you're getting, right? But Norville McKenzie, just top down, every position group being very intricately coached. It's very interesting. Some other larger notes from the day. Marcellus Hawkins, he was on the side doing some rehab, but he looked good. Running full speed in sprints. I would say he's trending towards a return, albeit you're returning bell cow back. You don't want to work him back too fast in spring ball and get him dinged up, run in between the tackles on practice number 8, and then you lose him for all of summer. So I think they're going to be very cautious with him, but he looks good. I don't think that's anything too serious. Snook Peterkin was back out there in pads. I know he was just doing walkthroughs a week ago. We'll see if he participates in the scrimmage this weekend, but a good sign to get him back rolling, putting weight on, coming out of basketball. One note that I don't want to be overlooked is that I know there's a lot of shuffling in what we saw first team, second team with the defensive line room, especially that edge position. We've talked about it a ton on this program, and maybe not even enough. But when you just look at height, weight, speed guys, some guys that just look like they're at that power 2 top echelon of college football. Noah Chambers, that guy last year as a true freshman was one where you point at him, that's going to be a player. He still looks every bit like that. Another one that really jumps off like that, but is a newcomer, Javian Hilson from Missouri. The way he looks, the strain he plays with, he is violent coming off the edge. I mean, a couple reps today and stemming back to last week where he just looks every bit as advertised. Now you have to go and do it in a game. He hasn't shown that or been afforded that opportunity yet at Missouri. But that is someone that I think will factor very heavily into that lineup rotation because he just has all the tools, height, weight, speed, physically. When you look at him, like, okay, this is a guy that can go get after it. Along the offensive line, still that same kind of rotation. Johnny Garrett working on the inside. Aiden Lynch getting a look at tackle. I think Aiden Lynch have heard really nice things about him for a couple years. Last year probably got a little bit of the raw end of the deal, right? Getting thrown in, facing live bullets, and, just because of injuries, it kind of had to get thrown out there to the Wolves. And he showed a lot of nice things. They're holding penalties, and there were different things that definitely got him. But I think there's a ton of development there, and that's Matt Moore's angle, recruiting, and then the development play. You look at what he did with Zach Frazier, Wyatt Millam. There's a ton to be developed, and I think he's someone they're very high on. People have been concerned about the offensive line. I know a lot of those, or all those guys in that line that have been named at that first five right now are working at that first group five, or returners, right? Working at new positions, and another year of development under Matt Moore. You look at Kyle Altuner, how effective he was in the run game a year ago, but he really has the opportunity to take a big step. Same with Aiden Lynch. A couple of those other guys, Laith Gannum, he has a ton of room to explode onto the scene. And that's still with Logan Howland down and a couple of those other guys a little banged up. Brody Meadows, I know he's out there, but he's still coming out of that boot. So I think that's something to watch. And then another note, we touched on the top, but Bryce Baker, he's showing some things with the legs and even spinning the ball around. Like, he's a quality quarterback. We'll just see. I think Ethan Grunkmeyer still has a very firm grasp of that quarterback battle, but Baker brings a whole different skill set that Gronk and Kuhn, they just don't have that mobility aspect that he does. But yeah, highlighting again, I think Javian Hilson is one of those defensive players that you just look at and it's like, that's one that is every bit what you would imagine. So those are just some initial takeaways from today's practice. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the live chat. We'll get to those. Really excited about tomorrow. Going to have Josh Clark interview him tomorrow, and then we'll hopefully have that interview turned around on the YouTube channel and on X at Kolby_Crawford by Thursday. So if you have any specific comments, now's the time to jump those in the live chat. Just a quick refresh after practice. So got a comment here. Franklin 2VT, did you get in the scruff, big dog? Well, we're all family here on Kolby's Corner. Tomorrow, of course, is the interview day with Josh Clark, but the fun times and story times of covering college football. So this morning, going to the facility, running a little bit late, and borrow one of my buddy's motorized scooter devices. And look, man, we're all family here. We're just going to lay it out there. We go into something gets sucked up in the wheel, and we go straight up over the handlebars into a full home plate slide right in front of McBride Hall. So if you saw me around 7 or 8 in the morning, whatever time it was, yeah, that was me. And then even later in the day, after interviewing James Franklin, the tripod and the camera tips over. So it's been quite a day, but we made it here on Kolby's Corner. So if you're here, head over to vtscoop.com and brighten the day up. Use code Kolby, 60% off annual VIP, because looks like, just as we're talking, might have a recruiting recap on player at the quarterback position from the visit. So you're going to have a ton of really exciting things coming out over there. But yeah, definitely an eventful day covering some Virginia Tech football. So yeah, if you have any questions, let's jump into those. If not, we'll be back tomorrow night, and I have a Josh Clark interview on Thursday. Got Ashton Crowder in here. How are Coach Franklin's practices different than years past? I would say it's very similar the way it's structured. Brent Pryde, Penn State disciple, came with a lot of his teachings that he had from Penn State already installed. So, I would say the timing, the pacing, some things that I was kind of surprised from. I've had friends who have worked up at the program at Penn State and have heard that those practices were a lot longer or more just not in depth, but just more spread out. And, you've heard different things from Signetti and different coaches of maybe even shortening practices, more efficient stints. But Franklin kind of even doubled down on that today in the post-game, or I guess post-practice media availability, saying toughness really stands out in today's college football where, with how the rules are, you're not hitting, you're not teaching tackling as much, pad to pad. And he said that's something that's going to always be a core tenet of his programs. You hear about some different programs like Miami, Alabama that are hyper physical, and you see the success they've had in recent years. So that's something that he is really heavily leaned into. So I think that would be the thing where it's very similar. The timing is almost right on line, right there about 2 hours for a practice, 2.5 hours. I would say the drill work, though, just among the assistant coaches he brought in, is a lot more targeted and intense for shorter periods before they get into full team periods. And I think that's something that's pretty noticeable. Now, is that just individual coaching like preference and how you keep your foot on the gas? But I would say that's the biggest change. And mixing in some different competitive periods throughout practice. And he always ends practice, like he mentioned, with typically a special teams drill. He said the one position group that was standing out was the kickers between Will Love, John Love. There's one more. I forget his name. Kolby, that's the other one. Among some other guys that can kick. But those guys, he says they've looked really nice and ending out on those deals because, like you said, you go into a practice, you see the 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense going after it, and specialists always off to the side, long snapping, working on their punts, dropping snaps there. And it's hard to simulate that type of pressure until you get on the big field. And you don't really do that as much or focus on it as much in practice. Special teams is always that third phase that's sort of left behind. So ending practice on that, costing up downs or push-ups on, success on a special teams drill under pressure. It sounds like special teams been delivering under pressure, but I would say it's very, very similar to what Pry's done. Got Alexander Meisler 482 saying, what's the deal with student managers getting involved in drills? So I think you're referencing Thomas Hughes put out the tweet. He had the quote from Kamari. That was after the camera tipped over, so I had to walk away. But Kamari Copeland was talking. He was one of the players made available today after practice. And he was talking with Thomas, and I guess he gave a quote saying Javian Hilson, pushed over or tackled a student manager on a drill holding a bag. And like I said, I didn't see that drill specifically or even hear that comment, but you can just tell he is very violent at the point of attack and aggressive. And Brett plays with just a violent streak about him. He's someone – another guy on the defensive line I'm going to have to check in on is a Colorado transfer, Sam Okunlola. Just on his health status, I haven't seen him or even noticed him when we've been out there. That's something I got to catch up on when we're back on the practice field. But I would just say, Hilson, he jumps off the page a little bit, certainly. A lot's going to have to flesh out of that defensive line room. But him, kind of what you're getting in Kamari Copeland. But even talking to him post-practice, he said he feels like he left a lot of meat on the bone after, winter workouts. He said he lost a lot of tire pulls, more than he was happy. And he's got to get his lick back in spring practice. So everyone's kind of playing with a chip on their shoulder. And that goes into the championship mindset. Coach Franklin, after practice, talked about how that's the new slogan on the back of the team meeting room, championship mindset, that if we're not buying into things that are making us win or making us better, then we need to eliminate them. And you can really kind of see that trickling down. Talking with Tyson Flowers after, saying Brent Pry's got like a whole new aura and juice around him. Playing with the new guys, he's gotten on a really good rapport. You talked about Cam Chadwick, the transfer from UConn. Like, those guys were back there playing in the backfield on Tuesday in a competitive period. He didn't even know. He broke up the ball, and Chadwick was right there to pick it off. He didn't even know he caught it. So they're getting in rhythm. I think everyone, obviously the vibe's very high with Franklin, the way the talent has elevated from a year ago. So they're just kind of all getting familiar. Got Ashton, one more question here. Have you gotten a chance to see if they're using much 12 personnel or not? Yeah, you've definitely seen some looks with them working with the two tight ends out there. Benji is the guy at Virginia Tech. He's the guy most people have been familiar with. But Luke Reynolds is someone that, going back to winter workouts, as soon as he got on campus, when they were just doing individual drills, or you've heard from individual throwing sessions and such, that he is one to certainly keep an eye on. He has the route tree like a wide receiver. I think they're going to use him a lot like a receiver, a pass catcher, as you've seen Penn State use Tyler Warren as almost that number one guy. They're going to split him out wide, but he's physical blocking too. He brings such a dynamic skill set. And then to have him, Benji, and then Jerickis Harrison. I don't want people to overlook Jerickis Harrison. I've been saying it on here that he had very big offers that I don't think many people would expect from different teams in the Power 2 leagues to leave Virginia Tech and decided to stay. That is the experience and the prestige of what Ty Howell brings. And he's got a room that's deep and's got a ton of talent in it. So I would say between those three guys, you're going to see them on the field a lot together in different mixes and matches. But I think Jerickis Harrison's also had a really nice camp. Made a nice play today in the alley drill, locking in on a block and getting downfield with it, which was, just teach tape. So him, Luke Reynolds, and Benji Gosnell, Benji, one of those leaders, probably going to wear the C on his chest again. So I think the tight end position, we keep talking about wide receiver Aiden Green, Keyshawn Brown, who are going to be these 4 or 6 guys who step up. You might have to look at that tight end room again, as those guys kind of being some of those lead pass catchers. But yeah, that was just a quick recap show. It's been a crazy, eventful day for me. So I appreciate everyone jumping in here. And like I said, if you enjoy the content here, we're going to have a ton more. Interviewing Josh Clark tomorrow, long-form sit-down interview. If you have questions, drop those in the chat of this. We'll try and work them into that interview. But yeah, I would highly implore anyone, head over to vtscoop.com. Use code Kolby when you join. Annual VIP membership. It is really the best place to be for inside coverage of Virginia Tech. And you get it for all FBS teams. Every single team that has a 24/7 sports site, you get inside knowledge. So I can't recommend that enough. Thank you, everyone, for the support on the show. You don't know how much it means, especially on days like this. So thank you. We're going to keep making better and better content throughout spring. And we're just getting started. Practice number 4, we got 11 left. So let's make it count. But yeah, until tomorrow night, appreciate everyone. Have a great rest of your evening. Enjoy dinner. Peace out and God bless.